Ladies and gentlemen, I am Yusril. It is the 16th of September, and welcome to a look at the new tactical Warbirds. A couple of disclaimers first. One, these are my first impressions after a few days, and two, like all MMOs, reality is subject to patching. There are currently 3 of these new Warbirds available. The Arkeef is a Tier 4, i.e. Commander, Warbird. The Arcala is an upgraded Tier 4 ship, and lastly the Arkeef Retrofit serves as the Vice Admiral version of the line. We'll take the basic Arkeef first. This plugs a gap that a lot of people have been complaining about, namely that after 30 odd levels getting used to escort style Warbirds, the only Tier 4 birds available were the cruiser style Doderidex and Dorithau. It wasn't unusual for players to simply slog through Tier 4 in the Mogai rather than completely work playstyle, ship fitting and habits to accommodate the switch from escort to cruiser. The Arkeef is very much the traditional escort. Commander and Lieutenant tactical stations give it a bit of bite, with an engineering and science lieutenant stations providing for a bit of flexibility and durability. A base turn of 16 puts it only slightly behind the Defiant for agility, but it does compensate with a bigger crew, 300 versus 50, and a slightly thicker hull. The upgraded Arcala is a direct counterpart to the Sao Paulo class. Both ships mount quad cannon with 4 damage bonuses as their special equipment, the Sao Paulo using phasers, the Arcala using plasma. However, while the Arkeef and the Defiant are more or less equal with minor trade-offs, the Arcala is very definitely superior to the Sao Paulo, mounting a 4th tactical console as well as a universal lieutenant station. It's a marginal case. The hull is a little on the thin side, and not having a 3rd aft weapon will leave it a smidge undergunned, but the impression I had after a few hours mucking about with this ship is that the Arcala might well be perfectly viable up to and possibly in normal STFs. The big boy of the line is currently the Arkeef Retrofit. This is a Vice Admiral level 50 ship. The bridge layout is more or less what we've come to expect from Cryptic's top-of-the-line escorts. Commander Tactical and Lieutenant Commander Universal to provide some flexibility, and Lieutenants in Science and Tactical, plus an Engineering Ensign to cover the basics, even if that does leave it very weak on engineering without using the Universal slot as such. A base hull of 31,500 is identical to the Dalan Retrofit, and the turn rate is also the same. Indeed, the principal differences between the two are the bridge officer layout, the special equipment, and the looks. Interestingly, there are references to a fleet Arkeef. This will presumably work as per the other fleet vessels, adding 10% to base hull and shield modifier, as well as a 10th console. I would guess tactical to bring that to a total of 5. However, this variant remains both unreleased and unconfirmed at present. The Retrofit's party piece is what, on paper at least, gives it its role. This is the Focus Singularity Modulator console, and it's a universal console with 2 effects. The first, named in keeping with the Romulan Republic's new attitude of openness and honesty, is Annihilation Mode. Aside from popping out some extra fins, this adds 10 weapon power, removes 10 shield power, and ups your passive singularity charge by 50%. That last is especially handy because the console's other function drinks singularity power. This is the Focus Singularity Beam, and it has some basic similarities to the Quantum Focus Phaser found on the tactical version of the Vesta, being a heavy beam attack that is sustained over an extended period. However, there are enough differences for it to be interesting. Firstly, it uses singularity power, temporarily shutting down passive charging and draining 5 power per second. From a full charge, 100 power, you will therefore get 20 seconds and 20 pulses of plasma damage, with each pulse doing, well, baseline seems to be about 2 to 3,000 with a typical skill layout, but this is increased by usual buffs, so attack patterns, plasma energy consoles, etc, etc. Additionally, the beam inflicts a resistance debuff on the target, leading to progressively higher damage as the effect goes on. 50,000 damage would seem to be the practical minimum for a 20-second burst from this weapon, and given that I was able to get a predicted upper cap for the initial pulse of 5,000 damage, I wouldn't be surprised to see people starting to get 150,000 or more from this particular BFG, and it's easy to use. The description does refer to the weapon having a narrow firing arc, but 90 degrees really isn't that narrow when you're used to keeping 45-degree arc cannons onto target. I was expecting a 45-degree arc from the description, to be honest, and I don't think that would hurt the weapon's performance in the hands of a skilled pilot. Finally, the quad plasma cannon and the modulator combine to form an equipment set, which increases all plasma energy damage, and yes, that includes the singularity beam, by 10% if you have them both equipped, which may make up for the otherwise rather lackluster mods on the cannon. Note that this is plasma damage only, so the burn on the plasma torpedo is affected, but the initial kinetic hit is not. The Retrofit is probably the purest single-target escort that the Romulans currently have access to. The Singularity Beam is very much a boss-killing weapon, good luck keeping it on a target in PvP, and the bridge layout is decent, covering all the basic requirements of an escort, while leaving enough flexibility in the Lieutenant Commander Universal Station to allow it to adapt to circumstances and the captain's taste, especially if it's paired with an engineering cruiser. It's debatable whether or not the bonus from slotting the quad plasma cannon outweighs the loss from not having a better set of plasma dual heavies slotted instead, and of course it railroads you into plasma damage, but that's not a horrible thing in PvE. So, am I going to recommend that you rush out and buy this ship? It's a bit complicated. I think the basic Arkeef is going to be a runaway success, and deservedly so, since it solves a problem that's been around for Romulan commanders since Legacy launched, the abrupt jump from escort heavy cruiser handling at Tier 4, by adding an escort-style warbird to the tier. However, most people will get this ship as part of their promotion to commander, so perhaps buy is the wrong term here. The Arcala will probably do well, both as a shortcut through Tier 4 and as a transition ship into the early Vice Admiral game, which is what you'd expect for 1500 Zen, although it'll underperform noticeably against retrofits and fleet vessels. What I'm less sure of is the Arkeef Retrofit. There's nothing exactly wrong with it. It's a nice, solid, middle-of-the-road escort, but neither is there anything particularly exceptional about it from a performance standpoint, except that once every 3 minutes beam attack, and given that if people are looking for a damage dealer, it's got to compete against the Tavaro, Dalan, Mogai, Half-Air and the Dreadnoughts, not to mention the Danos and the Remor if those are available. Oh yes, and don't forget the cross-faction damage dealers as well. Let's just say the phrase saturated market keeps coming to mind. The real problem, however, is the notion of combining the Arcala's quad plasma cannon and the Arkeef Retrofit's console to unlock the extra 10% plasma damage. The Tier 4 bird is 1500 Zen, the Retrofit's 2000 Zen. The still hypothetical fleet hull will be another 500 Zen for the module, although you can of course buy those for energy credits on the exchange. So 3,500 Zen for the basic 2 set, 4,000 Zen for the fleet version if you ever get it. What does that put you into competition with? Well, single Dreadnought Warbirds at 2,500 Zen are 1,000 Zen cheaper, they have an extra forward weapon slot, a hangar bay, massively increased durability, and even more flexible bridge layout courtesy of a universal ensign, and lieutenants in both science and engineering. Oh, and in the case of the Scimitar, a 5th tactical console. Let's just say that the only thing that seems to save the Arkeef's blushes at this point is the Scimitar's glacial turn rate. As for the Tavaro at the other end of the scale, the Levelling Bird and the Retrofit are 2,500 Zen total, and if you buy the Legacy starter pack you get some free goodies into the bargain. Even after several months in, I still consider this to be the best of the escort warbirds. The hull's on the weak side, of course, 29.7k base on the fleet version, so concentrated fire won't even leave you with one last duty to perform. But it's not that far behind the Arkeef Retrofit's 31.5k, and it has slightly thicker shields and an engineering lieutenant to help compensate. It's more agile than the Arkeef, can just about match it for regular firepower. The trade-off of that engineering lieutenant is only having a tactical ensign as backup to your commander, and the old-school Type R torpedo is not only capable of brutal levels of AoE damage, but with some projectile duty officers and the Singularity Stabilizer console, the recharge time can actually go low enough that I suspect it might start to approach the Arkeef's beam attack for single target damage per second. If you want something more durable, Then the Dale Warbird and the Delan Retrofit together are 2,750 Zen. So even if you then go for the fleet version on top, you'll still have change left compared to the basic Archive set. The Bridge Officer layout is slightly less flexible, Lieutenant Universal and Lieutenant Commander Science rather than the other way around, but the 5th Tactical Console gives it an edge in regular damage, and it has the Singularity Inverter and a solid 10% advantage in both shield and hull strength to give it significantly increased durability. The Morgai and Valdor set take the durability angle even further, with a Lieutenant Commander Engineering and even higher hull and shield strengths, but it's the same price. Valdor, Morgai Retrofit and Fleet Upgrade come to the same as the Archive and Arcala together, and you do start trading agility for this. And this, I think, is why I've been going round and round the issue for the last few days. The contradiction is that the individual ships are solid purchases, but as a rather expensive set, they lack either the sheer power of the Dreadnought Warbirds or the value for money of the Tavaro set. So if you're going to spend upwards of 3,000 Zen on an endgame damage dealer, my advice remains as follows. Either 1, go the whole hog and get the Dreadnought 3 set if you can handle the turn rate and the truth. 2, get the Scimitar on its own, either with or without the 500 Zen Tier 1 Tavaro for the Singularity Stabilizer. Or 3, get the Legacy Starter Pack for the Tavaro set and possibly blow some cash on upgrading to a fleet hull. I'll leave this review with a final note to Cryptic. Perhaps no more escort warbirds for a bit? We've now got a total of 7 escort hulls and 3 dreadnought variants, intended to bring fiery plasma doom upon the enemy, but the Romulans still have no dedicated carrier, 2 science vessels, 2 more or less straight-up engineering cruisers, and 1... well, the Dodex is nominally a cruiser, but that's a whole other video. I am Yuzril, that has been a look at the tactical warbirds, and until next time, farewell.